The evening had settled over the quiet suburban neighborhood like a well-worn blanket, with streetlights flickering to life as the last golden hues of sunset faded behind the rooftops. It was that magical hour when children were being called inside for dinner, televisions hummed with the evening news, and the comforting aroma of home-cooked meals drifted through kitchen windows. On any other night, this would have been just another ordinary Tuesday in the sleepy town of Millfield. But fate, as it often does, had other plans. Hector Perkins guided his slightly dented pizza delivery car down Elm Street, the familiar rattle of the engine mixing with the radio's soft static. At 37 years old, Hector wasn't what most would consider hero material. His uniform shirt was perpetually wrinkled, his hair always looked like he'd just rolled out of bed, and he had a habit of talking to himself while driving. But what Hector lacked in polish, he made up for in kindness. He knew all his regular customers by name, always remembered their usual orders, and had been known to deliver pizzas to elderly residents long after his shift ended. As he turned onto Maple Avenue, a movement in his peripheral vision made him hit the brakes harder than intended. The stack of pizza boxes in the passenger seat slid forward with a thump. There, in the fading light, Hector saw something that turned his blood to ice. Flickering orange light dancing behind the curtains of the Wickersham family's two-story colonial. For a heartbeat, Hector sat frozen, his mind refusing to process what his eyes were seeing. Then, with terrifying suddenness, the flames burst through the upstairs window in a roaring explosion of heat and light, shattering glass raining down onto the neatly trimmed lawn below. Sweet mother of, that's the Wickersham house. Hector gasped, fumbling for his phone with suddenly clumsy fingers. He dialed 911 with one hand, while throwing open his car door with the other, his pizza delivery bag forgotten, as he sprinted toward the burning building. Inside the Wickersham home, life continued in blissful ignorance of the disaster unfolding above them. Margaret Wickersham stood at the kitchen island, carefully slicing vegetables for dinner while humming along to the radio. Her husband, Robert, sat in his favorite armchair in the living room, absently scratching behind the ears of their elderly bulldog Sir Bumblesnout as he read the evening paper. Upstairs, 7-year-old Lucy Wickersham sprawled on her bedroom floor, completely absorbed in coloring a picture of a unicorn for tomorrow's school art show. The first tendrils of smoke crept under doors and through heating vents with sinister patience. By the time Margaret noticed the acrid smell and frowned at her oven, the fire had already claimed most of the upstairs hallway. Outside, Hector skidded to a stop on the Wickersham's manicured lawn, nearly tripping over Sir Bumblesnout, who had somehow wandered outside and was now sniffing curiously at a discarded sausage roll near the sidewalk. The dog barely glanced up as Hector stumbled past, his eyes fixed on the growing inferno. Hello? 911. There's a house on fire at 142 Maple Avenue. Hector shouted into his phone, his voice cracking with panic. People are inside. Yes, I'm sure. Send everyone. Fire trucks, ambulances, the whole lot. Most sensible people would have waited at that point. Most people would have stayed safely on the lawn, waving their arms to guide the approaching emergency vehicles. But Hector Perkins had never been particularly sensible when it came to helping others. Kicking off his slippery loafers, because as he would later explain to the baffled firefighters, you can't properly rescue people in shoes with no traction, Hector charged toward the front door. The heat hit him like a physical wall as he crossed the threshold, smoke immediately stinging his eyes and clawing at his throat. Mr. Wickersham, Emerus Wickersham, Lucy, Hector bellowed, his voice barely audible over the crackling roar of the flames. He stumbled through the smoke-filled living room, nearly colliding with Robert Wickersham, who had just risen from his chair in confusion. The older man's eyes widened in shock as he took in the scene. The smoke, the flickering light from upstairs, and the wild-eyed pizza delivery man standing in his living room in socked feet. Your house is on fire, Hector gasped, then, out of pure habit honed from years of customer service, added, and, would you like a free garlic bread? The absurdity of the moment seemed to snap everyone into action. Margaret appeared from the kitchen, her face pale with terror as she screamed for Lucy. Robert grabbed his wife's arm as Hector herded them toward the door, the smoke growing thicker by the second. They burst onto the front lawn just as the first neighbors began gathering on the sidewalk, some still holding their dinner plates, others filming on their phones. But Hector's relief was short-lived. Little Lucy was still nowhere to be seen. Where's Lucy? Margaret shrieked, her voice raw with terror. Hector didn't wait for an answer. Taking a deep breath of the relatively clean outside air, he wrapped the bottom of his shirt over his nose and mouth and plunged back into the burning house. As they limped around to the front yard, the first fire trucks came screaming around the corner, their sirens wailing like banshees. The gathered neighbors erupted into cheers and applause at the sight of Hector and Lucy, though the celebration was cut short when Lucy suddenly gasped. "Sir Bumblesnout," she cried, her eyes filling with fresh tears. "He's still inside." Hector opened his mouth to respond, but at that exact moment, a very disgruntled, slightly singed bulldog came waddling around the side of the house, his tail wagging lazily as if he'd just returned from a pleasant stroll rather than escaping a burning building. The old dog plopped down at Lucy's feet with a contented sigh, completely oblivious to the chaos around him. The next hour passed in a blur of flashing lights and shouted orders as firefighters battled the blaze. Paramedics checked Hector over, clapping him on the back and shaking their heads in disbelief at his story. The Wickershams, wrapped in borrowed blankets, couldn't stop thanking him between coughs and tears. By morning, Hector's face was on the front page of every local newspaper with headlines like "Pizza Delivery Hero Saves Family" and "The Most Extraordinary Garlic Bread Offer in History." The mayor presented him with a key to the city at a ceremony that Sir Bumblesnout slept through entirely, and the local pizza shop where Hector worked gave him a raise and a new title: Director of Emergency Deliveries. Life eventually returned to normal in Millfield. The Wickershams rebuilt their home with a state-of-the-art fire alarm system and a special dog door for Sir Bumblesnout. Lucy drew a picture of her pizza hero that hung proudly in the town library. And Hector? He still delivered pizzas, though now with a shiny metal pin to his wrinkled uniform shirt and a permanent place in town legend. Every time he handed over a pizza box, he couldn't resist adding with a wink, "Remember to check your smoke alarms." And if his customers noticed that he always took an extra moment to look at their family photos or ask about their kids, well, that was just Hector being Hector. As for Sir Bumblesnout, the old bulldog lived out his remaining years in pampered luxury, enjoying extra treats and belly rubs from everyone in town. Because even the most unexpected heroes, whether they're scruffy pizza delivery men or nap-loving bulldogs, deserve their happy endings.